Hello, everyone. I'm Nikki Miller. I'm a freelance writer volunteer for Rain Sarcoma. And I'm talking today with Kristine Nachbor. She's a third year medical student at the University of Minnesota, and she's one of five Sarcoma Scholars in the Jan Maudlin Sarcoma Scholars program. The goal of the program is to educate fellow students and the public about sarcoma cancer. We're going to hear more about the program from Kristine, the work that they're doing through the program, and get her perspectives on it. Welcome, Kristine. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Kristine, I understand you're one of five students in the program, and the Jan Maudlin Sarcoma Scholars program has given over 50 scholarships to students since 2009. And that's thanks to a generous donation from Jan and Tim Maudlin. And we really want to hear about the work that you're doing to educate students and physicians, as well as patients, supporting patients, and also educating the public. But first, we'd like to learn a little more about you. Can you tell us about your background and what led you to med school and to Rain Sarcoma?
Yeah. So I took a long way to get to medical school. After graduating in 2012, I lived on a sailboat that worked with pediatric patients from Fred Hutchinson Cancer Institute out in Seattle. And we took them on sailing trips, really to give family and the children a break from their treatments if they were healthy enough. And I think that was my first bump in with cancer. Then after that, I decided I wanted to see the world, so I signed up for a Master's International, where I went to Burkina Faso, worked as a Peace Corps volunteer, and did research there. And I initially was thinking I wanted to do ecology research, but I worked in the schools and I kept on seeing my kids get sick. It really made me think that education is part of people's success in life, but if people aren't healthy, then they can't go on and get their education. Eventually, I decided to go to medical school, but that took a little bit more. So I came back to the U.S. and as I was getting all the credits for that, I thought to myself that was a big change. So I bounced back to West Africa, worked for an international development organization, and really solidified my want to work as a physician. And so the month before my medical school started in July, I came back, and I had multiple cancer diagnoses. The first one right the week before I came back in July, then like mid-July, and then the week of the day of my white coat ceremony was the final confirmation. So a lot of my first year was spent in the hospitals with a family member and learning about cancer in the classrooms, but also learning about cancer as my family members went through it.
So can you tell us about the work that you're doing to increase awareness of sarcoma cancer with students and physicians, patients, and the general public?
Yeah, I think I'll start with patients. All the sarcoma scholars and physicians and community members within the sarcoma population, both patients and family members, are working on a notebook to increase accessibility of information for people who are newly diagnosed with sarcoma. Because when you're diagnosed with with the word cancer, whatever type of cancer it is, it can be pretty overwhelming. So we're trying to make that information more accessible. And then for physicians, even as we go through the medical education system, sarcoma is a pretty rare disease. And so a lot of physicians might forget to consider it when they're going through why is their patient coming in. Sarcoma cancers tend to be diagnosed later than they should be, often because it's missed. And so we've been working on increasing awareness through a campaign and trying to make sure that when a patient comes in, that this might come up in the in Epic, in other systems, and then we're also working on increasing awareness within our communities. So at the Minnesota State Fair, we're doing a research project at the Driven to Discover building. The research project is focused on people helping people. So family members and patients who understand sarcoma and have been through that experience have a type of knowledge that we don't all have as medical students and providers and medical personnel. And for those people then to give their own experience and information of what they've discovered while they've gone through their journeys, what they wish they had known, to collect that information and be able to give it back to patients who are now stepping into that space, I think is pretty powerful. So that's what that, and then also with that research project, people will hear the word sarcoma and start being able to ask, what is that, and understand more about it. So increasing awareness to our Minnesotan community. And I think through all these different projects, we also are trying to do just a baseline project of medical education and tackle medical students' understanding through a short presentation from physicians and patients within the University of Minnesota Medical School in Mayo. These all target different populations and I think are really powerful in being able to increase not only education and awareness, but also promote earlier diagnoses so that we can catch sarcoma earlier and change the outcome for our patients.
It sounds like the Sarcoma Scholars program has kind of a multi-pronged approach to education and increasing awareness. And that work is going to have an immediate impact on patient care, like you talked about the notebook, as well as helping students bring that into their future practices. What would you say the program has given you or contributed to you as a student and physician?
I think that so many things. I think the most powerful aspect is bringing the humanity back to the memorization of medical education. We're expected to memorize lots of facts, millions of flashcards, books and books of information. And I think sometimes we forget in all of the memorization and logic and thought processes that we're taught to go through, that there's a human on the other side, that there's a person going through that experience. And there's real power in knowing that, in remembering that. And I think that I've been exposed to stories and information that make that memorization more real and powerful and meaningful and help me get through some of the long hours and difficult situations that I encounter. I think it also gives me a perspective that each person needs something different, and hearing different people's stories, each one is it can be the same diagnosis with similar outcomes or not, but each person needs something different. And I think that individualization of medicine is something that you're not taught in medical school. And I think it's really powerful to learn before you get on the wards.
I'm sure there's some med students and faculty watching right now who are intrigued about the Jan Maudlin Sarcoma Scholars program. What would you tell them about the kinds of skills and experiences med students can expect to gain through the program?
I think that this program is extremely unique because it's a place where we have patients, families, students, and faculty all coming together. With the Red Flags Committee, you hear from patients and patient families about their lived experiences. From the providers, you meet them and they talk about the medical aspect of it. And then as a student, you get to grow and learn with this intersection between the communities that doesn't quite exist anywhere else in medicine and medical education. I do wish that this was something that all diseases had, to be able to sit at a conference with a pathologist, a radiologist, a oncologist, and a surgeon and talk about a disease process and then go talk to the patient who has experienced it and hear what it's like for them to live through it. That is something that doesn't exist currently in medical education, and I've had the honor and privilege of having through this scholarship.
So you've had experience with cancer in your family and have kind of been on that side of it. How has that perspective contributed to how you see patient care today?
I think that cancer impacts a lot of different people in very different ways. I went into medical school hating the word cancer and hating everything about it. And every lecture that I was in, I wanted to leave. And then throughout my medical education, I think it changed my perspective. Instead of seeing it as an end diagnosis, I started to see it more as a something that maybe we could work against. But I think even more than that, it showed me that there's sometimes it's not the diagnosis as much as the person who's behind it or with it that matters. To be some of the most powerful moments I've seen in my family and then as a medical student have been when you're just there with the patient. And to do something as simple, even with COVID, it's hard, but to give someone your hand or just be in a space, to sit down next to someone as they process something difficult is almost more powerful than the medication that you're giving them. I think we need both. We need the individualized targeting of these cancers, but we also need the humanity to really meet patients where they're at. And I've seen in my family's experience the lack of that and what that does. And I've seen the power of being with someone. And I feel that as a medical student, there's a lot of pressure to be fast and efficient and see all your patients. But there's also power in just being with people. And I've really feel like that has come into my medical school practice as I've seen more and more patients.
So Kristine, as we wrap up our interview, I just want to kind of open the floor to you for any final thoughts or anything you'd like to say about the Jan Maudlin Sarcoma Scholars program.
Yeah, I just really want to thank everyone who helped me to where I am today. My undergrad, Carleton College, Northfield, Minnesota, and the Ole's on the other side. Then the Sailing Heritage Society out in Seattle, that my first exposure really to pediatric oncology. Michigan Tech, where I did my master's, and Peace Corps, who changed my trajectory to medicine. And then finally, here back at University of Minnesota. Oh, and I forgot Catholic Relief Services. They really made sure that I wanted to go into medicine. University of Minnesota has been a rock through this crazy COVID time. And I feel like the Jan Maudlin Scholarship has really solidified my interest in cancer. I've had amazing mentors through my experience. Dr. Keeler, who really has taught me a lot about sarcoma. Dr. Andre, who's really interested in chemo prevention, and Dr. Versalati, who first introduced me to the labs. I wouldn't be where I am today without all of these people. And most of all, I want to thank the patients who have taught me about sarcoma and their family members, and then my own family. As you know, Nikki, has not been an easy experience, and I wouldn't have been able to get it through medical school and through these experiences without my family. So, yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kristine, for your time and for sharing your experience in the Jan Maudlin Sarcoma Scholars program. And thank you to Jan and Tim Maudlin for sponsoring the Sarcoma Scholars program, and to donors to Rain and Sarcoma who allow us to bring more of this content online and do interviews and things like this. So thank you, Kristine, and thank you everyone for watching.